Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of Funky Marketing podcast. And today I have a privilege to talking with a guest, which is, if you are reading her bio, and I recommend you do that. Her name is Gina Balarin. Go to LinkedIn right now, check out her profile and see all the things that she has done. I'm not going to go through all of them. You will have them is podcast description, but she's an author, board member, TEDx speaker, leadership coach, ghostwriter to CEOs, and a lot more things, right? She runs Verbalistic, where they work with technology, SaaS, and service clients to help them cut through the noise. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what really prevents company from achieving success. We're going to talk about how the leaders use words and body language to become more influential, especially important for today when we have a lot of introverts running the companies. And we're going to touch a little bit thought leadership, but let me stop talking and welcome Gina to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is delightful to be here.
Yeah, I like this kind of like, for me, it's morning conversations, because it's the first thing that I do for the day, and it actually, kind of lights the day.
Well, for me, it's the end of the day because I'm based in Australia. And for me, it's the perfect end to a day, to have a good conversation with someone who gets me thinking. And then as I go to sleep, my brain turns it into something new and mysterious when I wake up the next morning.
Love that. I can see that you are working with communication and words.
What gave it away?
Okay, so tell me, what did I miss in giving an overview of what you and Verbalistic does?
I really love the fact that you covered it succinctly and concisely. And I think, is there anything you missed? They call me Gina Ballerina. I was actually, in fact, trained as a dancer and took a different career path. I ended up finding my creative expression through words rather than, I actually studied drama at university, but rather than teaching people to be dancers or dancing on stage myself, I now help people be performers in their own right as a leader in front of their teams, in front of their employees, in front of their customers, or even just to improve their own self-confidence by making sure that the words that they come out of their mouths are words that they're proud of and that they're happy to stand in front of someone and go, this is me. This is 100% me. And you can judge me exactly the way you want, but I am proud to be me. I think that's the thing that makes me most excited. Helping people be proud to be themselves.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so many people are missing that because we live in a world when we look a lot of other people. I mean, it's social, we can see everything. And I feel like most of the times we try to be somebody else instead of trying to be ourselves.
Sad but true. That's why one of my big topics is authenticity. And the TEDx talk I did a few years ago was on marketing in the era of authenticity. Now, of course, how are you going to get people to watch something when authenticity wasn't even a thing at the time? Well, we gave it a really clever twist at the beginning and called it Confessions of a Liar, marketing in the era of authenticity. And you'll have to watch the TEDx talk to get the gist of it. It's not that long. But the principle is that I have had a love-hate relationship with life. And how can you do great marketing if you do inauthentic marketing? And that kind of is, I suppose, the cross I'll die on, is helping people realize that when you've got something that you offer that's a product or a service that genuinely helps people, that genuinely makes your customers delighted, then you can do it completely authentically. And that's what I think all marketing should be. Really something we can be proud of.
Yeah, that's very well said, like something to be proud of. But tell me, is lack of authenticity the thing that prevents, company from becoming, let's say, more successful? Because there are some people who have lack of authenticity, but they just got the right product or something like that. But how important are the charisma, the influence of the leaders of the company?
It's a question that I've been debating for a very long time, and the complex. It comes down to leadership versus management. And of course, we know that there's a whole big debate between what makes a good leader and what makes a good manager. But I think your question was, is authenticity what makes a company great? I think we need to differentiate between authenticity in a company and authenticity in the people. I would love it if every single company could authentically create great product or service. Sadly, not everyone is. But I think the difference is that even if your product is not the best in the world, can your people be authentic about why they do what they do? And can they find some kind of safe space to be 100% themselves? Because that's when you're going to get the most out of your employees. And I think that is the difference. Do people want to come to work? Well, hopefully, if you let them be more and more themselves, you give them the space to do the things that drive them, that make them come alive, you'll get that sense of pride because you're giving people the opportunity to create something that makes it worth coming to work.
Yeah, totally agree about that. The thing that I'm repeating all the time is like the company culture and the story starts with the founder. But then as he starts hiring people, they take the story and advance it to another level. And then the third level is also always the customers to telling the story. You know, the stories that we know from Google, from Netflix, those are the stories from the customers. It's not how Google was founded, right? They were founded for something else, but that's the story that customers are now telling.
Exactly. You've absolutely nailed the summary of the secret army: leadership, marketing, and the power of people. And the secret of the secret army is that your secret army isn't just your leaders and your managers. It is in fact your customers. You're absolutely right. Customer centricity is something that we've seen in the past in businesses. It's coming around again. It's coming around with even more vehemence because customers have the ability to have a voice that they never did decades. The democratization of information through social media and the internet, people have a voice. So if you give the opportunity to your customers to share that voice and you're doing the right thing by your customers, then the results can be amazing and beautiful. But what happens when your customers are unhappy and you don't give them a voice? They go to social media. They kick up a fuss somewhere else. You can't hide bad products and services for very long anymore.
Yeah, and what I would like to say always is, you know, when people say, we need marketing, right? Maybe the product isn't that good, but we need marketing. But marketing actually uncovers everything, every bad thing that you have about your product to the customers, to the people that you know
Exactly.
want to use your product and don't want to see all the bad things. And you know, and when you look at it from that perspective, it always gets back to the basics. Have you nailed the foundation, the culture of the company, the principles on which you are working with? And I want to also tackle a little bit, like, you're working a lot with tech companies, with SaaS companies, working with them as well. But the one thing that I'm seeing, they're engineers, developers, basically working with the same technology, more or less the same products in each company. But if you look at seniors, how do they choose the company they're going to work with? They look above those things. They look at the culture, the quality of life, you know, if the company stands for something, those kind of things.
I think that's a great place to be. Those who are in a position where they can pick and choose from the jobs that they want to do, choose because there's something about the company that resonates with them. And I suppose coming back to leadership, if a leader is able to embody that essence of mission, then they become a mouthpiece for the organization as well. Now, why did they take the first place? Hopefully, you took the job because there was something about the culture that resonated with you. Excited about that, there is always a way to bring out that excitement. Now, you talked earlier about a lot of introverts who have become CEOs. And yes, introverts can be charismatic, believe it or not. They may just be really good at putting on a brave face. But there is also a way of making sure that introverts can appear in the public domain and be compelling. Now, there's a difference between charismatic and compelling. You can be 100% compelling even if you're not necessarily charismatic, as long as you're able to tap into that thing that makes you come alive. Now, we all know the difference between Steve Jobs when he was standing up on stage, Bill Gates. Bill Gates is undeniably a genius, but he's not necessarily the world's best public speaker. But if you find him talking about a topic that he absolutely loves, there's almost an inner fire that he manages to convey to his audience. And I think that's the real secret behind helping inspire the people in your organization. It is to find that thing that makes you come alive, that spark. And when you capture that spark, there is a way to make your audience connect with you emotionally. And that's why I'm a ghostwriter and ghost presenter for CEOs, because I can help them find that spark and then realize what they look like in front of other people. Now, often public speaking is not about putting on a big, brave show. It's about tapping into what makes you most comfortable. May I share a story about a sales leader who I helped a few months ago? There was a fellow who was launching a huge, a big deal for his company. It was a new innovation center. And he was a speaker, as you'd expect from head of marketing at the time. But he was really good at impromptu speaking and really bad at prepared speaking. So we pre-wrote the script for him in his own voice. And then we trained him. And he's ex-military. So when he was training, he drilled and drilled and drilled. And he nailed the messaging. But then what happened was he completed all of his wow factor that he got when he was speaking in an impromptu way. So we talked him through it. You know, what do you actually want to say to her? If that word sounds awkward, let's change that word. If that sentence doesn't work for you, let's change that. All you need to know is these three key points. Say them however the heck you want. Because the point was he just needed to know what the key messages were so he could repeat those. And at the end of the day, he absolutely was on message. He could get the wording in the way that made him come alive and his audience come alive. But what we had to do was make one last change at the last minute. He was performing a TEDx-style presentation in front of really influential people across the whole of the region, and we made him sit down on stage instead of standing up and walking from side to side. Because the problem was, at the end of the day, he couldn't be his authentic self when he was focusing on walking. It was too much. But put him down in a chair, and all of a sudden he came alive. And that's how he got a standing ovation, even though he was sitting down.
That's a great story. I didn't think of that ending. As you were speaking, I was analyzing my performance of some of keynotes that I gave. I'm usually the one, charismatics goes. I have just a sentence on the screen and I talk. But I had two same topics that I talk about. It was two conferences, one in Albania, one in Macedonia. And on the first one, I started with the example of Marvin Gaye singing at the Los Angeles Coliseum NBA All-Star Game. It was the first time actually that somebody sang the US national anthem in a different way. He was left behind by everybody because of the drugs, depression, those kind of things. He wasn't even the first choice. It was Lionel Richie, but they only know hello. Is it me you're looking for, right? So they say, we're going to go with this guy. He was wearing actually the glasses with the price stamp on it. He didn't know or he didn't care. And he just got out there, started singing. Actually, before he got on the stage, it was the music started, which is not the common national anthem music. It was the music more suited for Let's Get It On, right? So the guy who was playing that said, did I just make a big mistake or no? But no, and the crowd was first, confused, and they started clapping, and it was standing ovation. And like Pat Riley, Patrick Ewing, Magic Johnson, they said the guy who just told the show, he was history, he was culture, and he was hood, all in these few minutes as he sang the song. And that is actually how I describe like funky marketing if I need to describe the company coming through the door, right? But not many people reacted over there. And I was like, okay, maybe it was the wrong crowd. Maybe they don't know who's Marvin Gaye. Maybe they are not into basketball, NBA, who knows? So then in Albania, I decided to change it and to do the intro talking about David Bowie, right? But first thing that I did, because it was the main category creation, that was the topic. So I said to the two people from the crowd, you sit down when I say to everybody to stand up.
Okay.
Right? And I tell everybody before we start, can you just stand up? And no, you need to all stand up, please, come on, go off the stage. And these two people were sitting, and I said, look, this is how everything works in the world, right? We are all playing somebody else's game. I told you to stand up. I didn't tell you why. You all stand out. You were listening to me, but these two people, they have their own mind, right? And there I started telling them about David Bowie. Actually, a lot of people in Albania were familiar with David Bowie. I'm like, okay, that's something else. And I tell them the story how he actually was writing his lyrics. Right? I don't know if you know, that's also a good story to tell. Basically, he made an album talking good things about the aliens, right? To say it as simple as that. In the times where everybody were afraid of aliens coming, we were going to the moon, they're going to come destroy us. It always the negative environment. And he did it for a couple of reasons. Because on the previous albums, when he published them, he got letters from teenagers listening to his songs, rewriting the lyrics. Basically, they were telling him, this is how it needs to be said, right? So he actually did that and came up with his most famous album and whole thing, how he was dressing up and everything. Say, aliens are coming and they're, actually talking with us through the radio, and said to the youngsters that we need to let them rock and roll. Right, and that actually started the whole movement of the young people expressing themselves, feeling free, and those kind of things. And then it blew up in the audience, and the speech was great. Yeah. The one in Macedonia was good, but it wasn't great. Yeah. Right, from that. And I have no idea actually if it's the audience or the story or something else, but I saw the need that I need to change something.
I think that it's actually the combination. You are adaptable. Great leaders are adaptable. You did your homework beforehand. You knew the audience. You knew what they were interested in or what they weren't interested in, right? You did your preparation. You had your stooges in the audience, which you'd already prepared to do that. And I think most important, if we look at it from a storytelling perspective, you actually gave them the end before you gave them the beginning. And that is a really cool storytelling tactic. If you think about it, there are a huge number of TV series, movies, but even books where people start with the end. And then you have to keep watching to find out what happens, because even though you know the end, you actually don't know how you get to the end. And that's kind of what you did right there. You were able to give people the, why is everyone sitting down message, which talked about differentiation. And then you could share a story about something magical that happened way back in the day that your audience was deeply able to relate to. If we think about it, storytelling tactics are actually very common, but they're not always easy to break down and to break up. And so great storytellers do it almost without thinking about it. But anyone can become a great storyteller if they learn how to manipulate the language. Now, I'm not about manipulating people, but I am about manipulating language. And I have a little game I like to play with myself. When I'm writing posts on LinkedIn, I'll write the post, I'll save it, I'll come back to it the next day and challenge myself to make that first line as compelling as possible. Something that shocks or surprises, something that intrigues or delights, something that evokes an emotion or makes people want to read more. Because if it's just the same old, you're not going to capture anyone's attention. Then sadly, we live in a world of instant attention, instant gratification. So if your audience is not bothered to click through, they're never going to hear the meat, the real juice, the nuggets of your story. And ironically, that's what you did. By having those people sitting down, you were able to create that compelling hook that meant that they loved waiting for you to get all the way to the end of the story.
Yeah, I love the breakdown of it. And you said one important thing, like on LinkedIn, people don't realize that it works the same way. You need to give them the thing that they will get from the post right away in first 2.5 lines, because the most important CTA is see more, right? They want to see if there is more, and then you elaborate Or there was something that people used back in days, I think like 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, but it was like broetry on LinkedIn that came up, and it was like you need to piss off people or make them sad in the first couple of lines, and then you get them to where they need to be at the end. Because like happiness is the emotion that they don't react to. People don't react to, I'm happy, okay, I will just move on.
That's a really interesting thought. I've tried sharing poems on LinkedIn just to experiment, to see how people react to them. And I think you're absolutely right. Something that keeps us in a similar state of mind. Let's assume we're happy.
Just a second. I'm not sure that you understood me. It's not poetry, it's broetry.
Okay.
So
Poetry.
kind of like,
Explain
yeah. I'll send you even the link. Now it became extreme and people are against it because they became people who just post their Instagram photos with nice bodies and they tell the story. But at the beginning, it was something else. There were people coming up and imagining the stories, and those are the people that actually started writing the way we now write on LinkedIn. Right? The guy, it was Josh. I don't remember his surname. He's actually banned from LinkedIn because he figured out the algorithm, everything. He was talking about it. He was using it in a ways that scraping the data, whatever it is. They actually published a couple of books. Send them to you. It's nice to have a couple of those. But it evolved from that time. But that was the first time LinkedIn was all sterile, virtual CV, those kind of things. And then a few people came writing in a way that we are writing now. Even more extreme. Now it's a little bit, lower and more specific, but there was like telling a story, and usually those were not the stories from those people. They just find it somewhere and telling it as their stories.
So not authentic, but effective.
Yeah, I mean, it looked real and it looked like it's there, but in time, how people figure those things out.
Yeah, deep fakes, challenges, artificial intelligence, these are things that potentially challenge who we really are as human beings. And I think the way to cut through the noise is to be authentic and to tell our own human stories. But that requires vulnerability. Look, at the end of the day, I've heard it said that artificial intelligence will not cost people their jobs. People who use artificial intelligence will cost other people their jobs. And I can't disagree with that. But I would say that we have to fight back against the blandization of society, right? Everyone becomes bland. Everyone says exactly the same thing. I don't know if I found this in music recently, sadly. I'm listening to a lot of music from the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's great when you've heard the hits, but when you've heard the hits, once a day and you hear them every single day for 4 weeks, because that's the people who are working around you are listening to the same song every day for 4 weeks. You're a little bit sick of it. But the lesson from that is that I now turn on the radio and listen to the top hits that are going on at the moment. And honestly, they sound identical.
Yeah.
The blandization.
You need to dig deeper if you really want to get to authentic stuff. That's what it is now. But
that's kind of the ending of a script. Where are we going next?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, if you look, we talk a little bit about leaders and how to speak more effectively, how to present more effectively. But if you zoom out and get it back to the company, what can we as leaders do to empower our people to kind of help us spread the message and help them also become active in this? Because when I look at the companies, I'm working a lot of time with companies, to help them with strategy, with those kind of things. One of the things it's LinkedIn, right? And I like to go, people ask me, how do you know what's the company inside the culture? I look at LinkedIn and what people are doing or not doing. Right? Both things are telling me what's going on inside the company. Are people free to talk about the things outside of business? Are they actually talking about? Is the leader just somebody who is reposting posts from the company page or has a voice? Those kind of things are telling me a lot what's happening inside the company.
I agree. I did a presentation a few weeks ago to a European bank. Now, you'd expect bankers to be quite boring, right? They're focused on finances. But it turns out that these were the least boring bankers I have ever met in my life. And there's a reason for that. Their company had gone through a massive cultural transformation in the last 18 months. And they had spent enormous time, effort, and input empowering their people. And that didn't just mean empowering them in a way that they had sessions on Fridays with people, influential speakers who they invited to come and help them talk about everything from how the brain works to how to do stories and storytelling, which is what I spoke about. What they actually did is they started democratizing culture into the regions. And they enabled people to do things for the community. They enabled people to set together initiatives that made them feel more like a team. And the amazing thing when dealing with this entire organization, every single person I dealt with there, is that they had such psychological safety in the organization. It was incredible. Now, it wasn't the leader of the entire organization that created that psychological safety, although I believe their leader is a very influential and powerful speaker. But that without that leadership, yes, permission to give people ability to be themselves, to make a difference, they wouldn't have been able to make that happen. And you could tell that the people working in the organization were free to be who they wanted to be. They were free to be their best selves. And that made all the difference in the world.
And that's not easy to let go and to, enable people and create that kind of an atmosphere. Maybe we can talk a little bit about how important are the guardrails, especially, if you talk about the industries like finance, procurement, logistics, those kind of things where you cannot speak about everything, right? But you still need to find some space to be creative and be yourself.
In highly regulated industries, I think the idea is, as you say, guardrails more than boxes. I've traveled a lot in Europe. I lived in the UK for many years, and we were traveling in Italy, and I'll never forget the sign at the top of a big monument of some sort. It might have been one of the old ancient Roman ruins, that kind of thing, right? And it was a sign, a little triangular sign with a guy teetering on the edge of a cliff as if he was going to fall off, and a bunch of rocks kind of falling down below him. And all it said was, warning, danger of death. Now, there were no guardrails, there was no protection, there was no big, enormous screen, there was no fence preventing people. It was just a sign going, you want to take your own risks, there you go, you die, it's your fault. And I think that there is a balance between giving your employees a warning and saying danger of death, or whatever the danger is in your industry, right? In some cases, it is literally danger of death. If you operate a heavy machinery and you do it wrong, you could die. You need to know the risks, but then it becomes your responsibility to take care of yourself. If an organization is really giving their employees power, they're also empowering them to know what will go wrong, rather than preventing them from thinking for themselves. And if we think about guardrails, there weren't even guardrails at the top of that Italian cliff. But there was enough information for anyone who's halfway sensible to be able to make that choice. And if we go back to the example of my client storytelling workshop for the bank, there are people guardrails. It was very clear that we would not publish something on LinkedIn about the event but once they saw it, they made one tiny little change, and that was fine. We talked about what I would say to their organization before we sent it out, but just to make sure that I wasn't putting anything contentious not necessarily, contentious is good, but not anything that was going to break any rules or any laws. And it was that element that there is almost a benevolent dictatorship, if you think about it that way. You give people the opportunity to make the mistakes, but you also know that someone will be there to pick up the pieces. It's kind of like a really effective parenting strategy. You give people equal amounts of love and discipline, and then you let them grow up themselves in the organization. It doesn't mean you're going to get it always right. There will be mistakes. The more freedom and flexibility you give people, the more risk there is that they make mistakes. But that you have to find that balance where if you give people no freedom and flexibility at all. They're just drones, and we don't live in an era of an industrial society anymore. We're not expecting people to produce exactly the same type of work. In fact, I saw an article today about the World Economic Forum and the types of skills that are required next year and in the next decade. Their intellectuality, their creativity. We're not looking for people who can follow instructions like robots anymore, because we have robots who can follow instructions like humans if they're not thinking clearly, creatively, and in a way that allows them to do what humans do best.
I didn't want to stop you because you nailed it and you said a lot of important stuff. And one thing I think I want to add when we talk about looking at these things as parenting, it's also giving your people a helping hand, a support when things get rough sometimes, or giving them also the frameworks, the examples, how to do it, and leading with your example. That's always also the important things, because I've seen companies, they don't become active, the employees, until the leader starts being active. But when the leader starts being active, and then the other people starts being active, and they say something which is, I don't know, like we had an example working with NIS Gazpromneft, like the huge oil company. I don't know if she's like a girl or lady, but it doesn't matter. Everyone's ladies. She was working at the internal magazine for the employees, and one of the things that she was doing over there was doing interviews with people working in different roles. So one of them was like fireman, one of them was somebody who is taking care of the suitcases at the airport, or those kind of things. And she published a photo when she was wearing the fireman's clothes next to the firefighter vehicle, how do we call it? And and there were people jumping in the comments and saying negative things. Oh, now you know how to stop the fire as well. Now you know this. And it was her like second post on LinkedIn, right? And she was like, panicking. First, it was like, I don't know what to do. And then it was like, I'm okay with that. But eventually she stopped posting.
That's so sad. Look, hate is going to hate. We've heard this in songs how many times, right? But at the end of the day, it's a question of finding your tribe. If you're connected with people who you sense something about, something that excites you about them, something that you sense a shared connection or a shared passion, then your tribe can actually be part of your secret army. They're the people who've got your back. And it sounds to me like she had the innovation and she had the creativity, but she didn't have anyone who'd got her back. And the haters hated more than the lovers loved, or the likers liked. And so we lost someone who sounds like she was really brilliant and innovative in her context. My hope is that she finds a context where she can be innovative, where the stuff that she's doing and stuff that she does is appropriate for the context in which she's offering. Because as much as we want everyone to love their jobs, as we want organizations to give their employees in highly regulated industries, the danger of death is higher, and you can give people guardrails, but there is also a duty of care. And sometimes you know that the level of the quality of the employees that you have is not enough for them to be able to be relied on to consistently keep themselves in danger. In those contexts, yeah, maybe you do need to be a little bit more regulated. God knows, I wouldn't like to go into a nuclear power plant with a danger of death sign. I want someone to tell me what outfit I need to wear and where I'm allowed to stand and what buttons I cannot press. It is an element of appropriate safety for the context.
Yeah, now let's take that example of having people with different opinions in the comments, and it's usually related to the thought leadership content, right? If you look at thought leadership, it's basically we are trying to give our point of view, our way of looking at the things, but how do we relate that to the personal branding, or are those things the same? Or how do they differentiate? I see a lot of people telling different things about those two. Like Ashley Faust from Atlassian has a pretty nice structure when it comes to thought leadership, but a lot of people still mix like the personal branding with self-promotion. That's also a thing. So let's dive a little bit into that.
So my first foray into thought leadership was reading a book by Tim Prizeman, who was a PR guy at the time. And it's literally called the Thought Leadership Manual. And it actually stands the test of time, even though it's probably about 10 years old now. And I suppose the idea behind thought leader are a leader in your thoughts. You are not a thought leader unless you are somewhat contentious. But the difference between being a thought leader and a brand advocate for yourself is that thought leaders have an opinion that is based on something. They take a fact that they start with and elaborate on it. That they take something that they see or read and they comment on it in a way that adds value. And there's a difference between being a thought leader and simply disagreeing with something, because then you're not actually a thought leader, you're a thought disagreeer. And actually creating and coming up with something new and seeing a new way of seeing the world. The difference is that if you see a new way of seeing the world and you just talk about yourself and how wonderful you are all the time, you're soon going to lose an audience. But if you do the same thing and you talk about them and how they can influence the world, how they can make a difference, there's a completely different perspective on that. And look, it's a boundary I'm trying to navigate myself, because if you don't know and understand your audience 100% deeply and thoroughly, there's a risk that you'll talk about stuff that you know, and there is a risk that you end up talking about things that are more important to you than they are to the people you might connect.
Yeah, that's,
so if we
that's extremely important.
If we make a good rule of thought, being a thought leader means understanding what are the implications of what you're saying for your audience. And sometimes you might not know what the implications are. Sometimes you might not care what the implications are, but you will have a reason for having that thought. And you'll need to understand what's the difference. Many years that I've been ghostwriting thought leadership content for CEOs, the most exciting stuff that I've been able to produce is when someone has such a unique voice. All you have to do is listen to them, move the stuff that they say around into a more logic and structured approach and put it back out there. Context is they'll say to me, "Oh God, Gina, what you wrote was amazing." And I stop them. I say, "I did not say that. I merely took down what you were already saying. I restructured it. I made the sentences grammatically. I added some headings and a beautiful title, but it's all you." And at the end of the day, thought leadership happen are brave enough to say what they really think.
So true, so true. While you were talking, the first person that comes to my mind is Tom Goodwin. I don't know if you know him or follow him. He's the guy who disagrees with a lot of things, but he elaborates, right? And he fuels the discussion about the things. And that is something that I love, a lot of other people love, because, like, I may not be right, but this is my opinion based on these facts, right? So, and then we can talk. And a lot of people don't want to get into that we can talk thing.
Exactly. And that's the difference between arrogance and open-mindedness. I'm not familiar with him, but it sounds like his approach is pragmatic. He knows that he doesn't know everything. He's open to being wrong. He's open to interpretation, but he also knows that he's got a valid point and it's based on something that he can justify. And maybe that's an element of thought leadership that those who are more about personal brand than they are about actually helping or challenging get wrong. I am me and I am amazing and you should all listen to me because I have this thing to say. Well, great. Everyone has something to say. But is the thing that you're saying based on evidence? Is it the thing that you're saying based on experience? Is it the thing that you're saying based on something that you can translate from a different context? Where does it come from? And if, I drill down into the levels of detail and actually I can't figure out why you're making that assertion, you're going to lose me and my interest very quickly. But if I can drill down to it, even if I disagree with you, at least I can admit that you have a point.
Exactly. And I think LinkedIn now is a good platform for those things as testing out ideas, right? What sticks, what not, because it's a slow platform. You can test things out. And I remember I recommend that people doing this like back in 2019, 19 things that I was seeing by spending years working in performance marketing is that there's a shift coming from lead generation to demand generation, because we actually need to create a relationship with people, not to do it transactionally. And a lot of people were like, oh no, this is not happening, these kind of things. And first post didn't get the traction, right? Because people didn't understand what demand generation is. Like here in Balkans, they are not even familiar with the term yet. And then 6 months later, I used the same post. I repurpose it. Sometimes I change maybe the hook or something else, and it blows up. And I can see, okay, maybe I was too early, because that also happened if we are like thought leaders and we are seeing things from different perspective. And also one more thing, now you reminded me, like why we are strategists. Basically because we know our customers and see the things that other people don't see. And we are pissed off and frustrated because others don't see it. But do we have the means and the structures and the framework to actually show the others that they see the same things and why those things matters to them?
I think that's beautifully articulated. It reminds me of a story about someone who wanted to be a thought leader, but actually couldn't really get it right. And the reason that they couldn't get it right is because they actually got in their own way too much. And they had so much important stuff to say, but they couldn't get it out because they were just too afraid that the rest of the world would judge them. Much like the example you gave earlier of the woman dressed up as a fireman who was criticized because she wasn't a fireman. Well, that wasn't the point. It was just an illustration of a story. It also reminds me of what happened when I wanted to start out in thought leadership. By the way, Broseau, Brousseau, does a training course on LinkedIn, which is the thought leadership training course. And I did it and was just mind blown, because for me, she basically started to ask you, what's your big hairy ass goal? She didn't use those words. That's a HubSpot term. But she did ask, what is the thing that you want to do to change the world? And for some reason, off the back of that course, I realized that I have a big hairy ass goal, and that is to eliminate human suffering at work. Now, I can't eliminate human suffering across the entire planet. No one can. I can't eliminate human suffering at work on my own. No one can. But bit by bit, we can work together to make sure that people who are working aren't suffering. And there's a very big difference. Now, what does this have to do with thought leadership? Very literally, it's that clarity. It is that concept of, and at the end of the day, if the audience can understand what difference you're trying to make, they'll be with you for the journey. How do I do that? I talk about marketing and why marketing needs to be authentic. I talk about storytelling and what a difference telling the story of your customers can make in marketing. I talk about how important it is for marketers to take themselves seriously so they can sit in the leadership positions they deserve, and they can stand on boards alongside the CFO loudly and proudly and say, we know what we're talking about. And I also do it so that I can improve the net sum of human happiness. Because little by little, if we share bits of ourselves that are vulnerable, but that connect with another human being, it reduces that element of doubt. If I can make one person feel like they're not alone, it means that I will have increased, just by a tiny fraction, someone's happiness. And if you think about it in an organization, if you as a leader can reduce the friction that you have in your employees, whether that is, oh, I don't feel like I'm good enough, or I don't feel like my work is thorough, or I'm worried about this project. If you can reduce that friction by a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit, the net sum of the organization goes up. And there is a direct correlation between employee satisfaction and productivity. So to me, it's a no-brainer. You make your employees happy, you get better work out of them, the organization does better. Like, why would you not want to make your employees happy?
Exactly. Love that. So tell me, what's next? What's the future for you and the company, and going towards that goal of eliminating suffering in the companies?
For me, it is to make a bigger difference. I have worked behind the scenes for organizations for a long time. I've seen how marketing strategy works. I've worked with marketing strategy. I've worked with content marketing. I've created magnificently beautiful messages. But that's not enough. Because until marketing is taken seriously, we have to go right to the top. And that means that it is my time to stand hand in hand with leaders who want to share their way of seeing the world so that they can make a bigger impact. And if that means I stand alongside someone not like Steve Jobs, someone more like Bill Gates, and go, Bill, I love you, you're a genius, but you're a bloody bad public speaker, please let me help you, then that's what I'll be doing. Or if it means that I'm standing alongside someone like Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, and saying, Steve, people love you, but you're not putting this down on paper. Let's turn that into a blog post. Then that's what I'll do too. Consider me the wind beneath the leader's wings. That's what makes me passionate. That's what comes next.
That's beautifully said. Yeah, that's beautifully said. Where can people find more information about you? Where they can find the book and all the amazing stuff that you are doing?
Well, connect on LinkedIn. No, I'm 100% serious. Even if we've never heard of each other, we've never had a conversation, just tell me where you saw me and go, I like this connection, or you said something, make it real. Don't just send me an invitation randomly. Send me an invitation that allows me to see you being. Please connect. LinkedIn is incredibly powerful. And then get hold of a copy of The Secret Army on Amazon. It's easy. You can buy it almost anywhere in the world. And here's another thing I will say. If you can't buy it and you desperately want a copy, reach out to me and say, hey, Gina, please, can I have a copy? Because the message is important. And the fact that we can work together to eliminate human suffering at work bit by bit means that if I can eliminate some of your human suffering, reach out. Let's have a chat.
Yeah, I think we need to open the Balkan market for that book. I think it's about time. Because I have another organization that does business networking, connecting business professionals, just so people can talk to each other. Now we have a partnership actually with a company that publishes business books and now translates a lot of stuff, and they accept suggestions, about the book. So that might be the next topic.
You never know. That would be amazing. I'd love that.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for spending like 50 minutes with me here, talking about things, sharing the experience. And I'm sure we're going to do that a few more times, I think in the next couple of months, because I'm already thinking about a lot of stuff that we can talk about. But for the people listening, now is the time when I tell you to go back to the beginning of the episode, listen to everything, press pause when it's something important, write it down, maybe reach out to Gina and tell her, oh, this one got stick with me and I want to talk more about this. I want to find out more about this thing. Maybe tell her that you heard about her Funky Marketing show. It never happened before, but maybe now it's the first time.
I'll let you know when they do.
Who knows? And also one more important thing, as I always say for the end, see you in the next episode. Follow, subscribe, share, and keep it funky. That's the most important thing for the end.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.